this again. To continue from yesterday on the practice of meditation, I was pleased to see today your postures have improved slightly, and I think that also means that you found it beneficial, because otherwise you would have happily carried on slumping. So that is something to keep going back to sit as upright as possible, given the circumstances of the day. So that's to do with whatever you're sitting on and however your body is functioning today. You put it as best you can in an upright position. And then you settle down, and then what? Then comes the hard part. There's a description of meditation that I've heard once. I don't remember who said it, but I found it very helpful, and that is that meditation done properly in the Zen tradition is very much to what you do when you go to sleep. Except you don't go to sleep. And this is an important point. We're not sleeping. When you go to bed, if you think about that, what you do whatever, you watch something, you read something, you talk to somebody, and then at some point in there you decide, okay, this is it for today. Now I'm going to sleep. And you put your body in a comfortable position. And then you give over. You don't work on falling asleep. Because if you do, you won't. It's very funny like that. If you work on it too much, you won't fall asleep. You worry, or you start to figure out stuff. It's the same with the practice of Zen. At some point you just have to let go and trust that your body and mind will actually know what to do. And they do. It's actually the same with eating and drinking. You put something in your mouth, you chew it for a while, you swallow it, and already you don't really know what you're doing when you're swallowing. And sometimes it goes wrong. And then you forget about it. And the whole digestive process from here all the way down to there, you're not very aware of it unless something is not right. Then you have a bellyache. Other than that, you trust the process. Meditation can be trusted in that very same way. But in order for that process to happen, you have to do a couple of different things. And we call that not holding on and not pushing away. Of all the various things that come and try to distract us. Like cats. He's an excellent example, that cat. He's really great. Another analogy that I've heard, I'm just throwing various analogies at you so that you can pick one or make up your own, is that it's a little bit like walking, and walking is continuously interrupted falling. So I find a fantastic way of describing walking. And if you watch a tiny little kid that's just learning to walk, they run around and they trip up and they bounce off the pavement and keep going. Once you get a little bit older, you lose that ability. And when you walk and you trip, you flop down on your face and you have to sit there for a little while. But the actual walking, if you think about it, you let go of one foot and then there's a little nothing, and then you touch the ground and there's a little nothing, and so you touch and you fall, or you fly. Because falling in itself is not a problem. Landing is the problem, always. So if you could free fall, that wouldn't be a problem. It's the landing. And for me, being in meditation is like free falling, like being in space. And as long as I'm free falling, there's no problem. It's a little scary at times, but that's only because I worry about the landing. And then when you see stuff coming by, like planets or asteroids or memories or ideas or opinions, if they just fly by, they're not a problem. When you grab a hold of them, there's friction. And then there's pain. Now when we sit with our bodies and our minds, we are aware of whatever. We pay attention to whatever. We don't have a particular focus in Zen. Just pay attention. And then you will begin to notice that your body keeps functioning. Your intestines are working on breakfast, your heart is beating, your blood's going around, you're breathing in and out. There's all these other things that are working. The world is carrying on, there are sounds outside, there are other people in the room. And your brain is also working. Your brain is an organ just like any other organ. And we're not going to require it to stop. Many people would like that. They would like to have some peace from their brain. But it's just an organ, and it's just doing its thing, which is generating responses to triggers. And you're aware of it. And just like with any other response to a trigger, you can hold on to it, you can push it away, or you can let it be. And those three options we have all the time. Now most of us have learned over time to pay a very intense attention to our intellect and to our memory, those two especially. Some people pay a lot of attention to their creative side. Then you have your intuitive side, and you have a few other sides, but all of that really comprises only a very small part of your mental activities. And the largest part of it you're not even aware of, but those seem very important. So your intellectual mind is used to you paying attention when it comes up with a comment or an opinion or a worry. And for many people, what happens when you first begin to practice letting go and practice meditation, your intellect is a little bit like a 2-year-old, and if it doesn't get attention, it'll throw a fit. It says, pay attention, and it gets stronger. You can also see it as you have this whole cupboard, and memory is like that. You have this whole big cupboard somewhere in your house, and all of your life you've put stuff in there, and every now and then you go, this cupboard is a real mess, but it's so big I'm just not even looking at it, just keep throwing stuff in it. And one day you decide, I'm going to see what in there is still useful and what isn't. And then you open the cupboard and all this stuff comes out, and it can be overwhelming. That happens regularly when you first start to do meditation practice. It's overwhelming, the amount of stuff, the amount of noise, the amount of distractions that your own brain comes up with. And the good thing about that is that this is only temporary, and it actually means that you are paying attention. Before you opened your cupboard door, you didn't even know what was in there. Now you're beginning to get an idea, so that actually is a good step. You're beginning to see it. And then it is a matter of simply sticking with the exercise of when there is a thought, to notice it and say, thank you, not now, very politely to yourself, thank you, not now. The thought might not go away, but you don't have to be angry about that either. And when you feel frustrated, you go, thank you, not now, that's not necessary. And over time, you will get more skilled at that. It becomes more obvious. And sometimes you can even turn it round. We had a meditation group once that was sitting somewhere, and it was a summer evening and the windows were open and it was very lovely. And no sooner do we all sit down to meditate, or somebody in a neighbor's yard decides to do some trimming, and they pull out their whatever that thing's called.
Weed whacker.
Thank you, the weed whacker, and it goes wah, wah. And it was very interesting because after sitting for 45 minutes, we talked about it. And of all the people there, almost everybody had had a different reaction to it. Some people felt very irritated to the point of wanting to leave, but they didn't, so that was a victory. Some people never even noticed it. So I thought, And there was one woman who said she actually, when she heard it, she thought, how nice, I don't have to do anything, I can just sit here in peace. And so she used that irritant to appreciate her peacefulness. So you can take things as you want. It's still the same weed whacker. But what you do with it is your choice. And so when things arise in your own mind, like somebody was mentioning yesterday, memories. Memories can be pretty persistent. They are triggered. They don't just come out of nowhere. And so if you have a memory that comes up every time you sit down, you might, at another point in time when you don't do Zazen, have a little conversation with yourself or with somebody else on what this is about. Because sometimes it needs to be addressed. It comes up because it wants something, it needs something. And then it is good to ask yourself, what does this need? Because until you fulfill that need, that thing will keep coming up to pester you. People have a little blank look. For instance, if you've been in a bit of a scrap with somebody and you've said something that you really wish you hadn't said, then you go down, you sit to meditate, and this memory comes up and you feel a little bad about it. But you know that meditation means letting things go, so you're trying to let it go. And next time you sit down to meditate, it comes up again and you don't feel so good. That would be an example where something is needed and you may have to go and apologize or write the person a little note or do something to set the situation right. And then when you go sit, you can sit in peace. Another example is that sometimes there's something you need to do, and some people have that kind of memory. The moment they sit down to meditate, they think, oh yeah, I should pay the electrical bill, and as soon as they get up, they completely forget all about it. If you're that kind of person with that kind of mind, bring a little piece of paper to your meditation seat and a pen, And when that memory comes up, write it down and say to yourself, I'll deal with this as soon as I'm done meditating. And then you have to also deal with it. It's all about taking responsibility for setting the conditions in your mind. And so if you promise yourself you're going to do this, you better do it, because otherwise you won't believe yourself and you'll just keep nagging. The principle is simple enough, but to actually do it usually takes some getting used to. Over time, you will find that sometimes it's easy to rest in that free-falling space, and sometimes it is not. Sometimes there's just a lot going on, or your mind is just very agitated. And at those times we use something to help that agitated mind, or that worried mind, or that mind that just can't just be. My teacher used to call that, give your dog a bone to chew on. And she would compare the mind to a dog that needs training. Sometimes in Zen they talk about the monkey mind, but nobody here has monkeys. But we all know about dogs, so we use dogs. And sometimes your dog just needs to be given a bone to prevent the dog from chewing up something else. I had a little dog that I got from the shelter, and he had anxiety problems, and he would eat a shoe. He would demolish a shoe in 5 minutes flat, and he would usually pick a visitor's shoe. And he'd be very quiet about it, and he was so cute. And then you say, oh good, the dog is quiet, and you look around and there's a pile of pieces of rubber. And so we got a rawhide bone and gave him, instead of the shoe, we gave him the bone, and he actually accepted that. And then after a while, when he started to feel a little more secure, he didn't need the bone anymore. Our minds are very much like that. Except we're not so endeared by our minds as we are with the little dog. But you can learn to be endeared by it. And so, things to use as a bone for your dog mind are, first of all, the body scan that I mentioned briefly yesterday. That's sort of the simplest. Secondly would be counting. If you're going to use counting, count to 10 and then back. Into 10 and then back. And try to let it go then. Don't sit there just counting all the time, because then you reinforce that habit of needing to do something. But it can really sort of help you, because your mind is like the dog. Counting is kind of boring. What I use, it's a similar kind of thing. Sometimes my mind gets into singing a song. Especially when we've gone to a particular hardware store which has 60s music. And it's really fun. It's really nice, and it sticks in my head, and then I'm going home and I have this song in my head. And try as I will, it will not disappear. My mind just keeps singing that song. So then I go, okay, let's recite the scripture of great wisdom. And my mind is funny, so I'll recite one line and then one line of song, then another line of scripture and another line of song. But I insist, and after a while I'm sticking with the scripture. But that's boring. So then I let that go. It's very interesting how that happens. You just wean yourself off a little loop that you have. Unfortunately, what our mind brings up is not always that funny or lightweight. And sometimes what comes up are memories or anxieties that are really pretty serious and very, very painful. And if that happens, it actually is a good idea to find a person you trust and who is wise and who has ideas that you feel are compatible with your spiritual practice, which might be a monk, but it might be a therapist, or it might be a good friend, and then work through that particular part of your being with a little bit of help. Even if you just have a memory of something, you have a memory of something that you did that you're ashamed of, that sense of shame, if you can find another person and you tell it to, and the other person doesn't fall over backwards and runs away screaming and says, "Man, you're bad," but actually says, "Yeah, that was bad. And I respect you as a human being. And what can we do now?" That helps in the process very much. So when you find yourself being stuck in such a way, or something is real painful and you keep reliving it, find some help with it. If it's medium serious, it might be enough to do some self-examination or doing some journaling or just having a good talk with yourself. And all of those are part of the Zen practice, but they are in themselves not Zazen. And it is a good idea to separate those two out a little bit. So when you do your just sitting, try to just sit and keep not holding on and not pushing away and not deeply investigating. Just keep coming back to not now. Just sit. Just be. And then at another point in the day, you say to yourself, right, let's have a look at what's going on, what my mind brought up, all this stuff that I need to do or think about or clarify or sort through. That is a part of the practice that is important, and it is something else. Just as relaxation is part of the practice but in itself not Zazen. And there are people who like to do another form of meditation where they just relax very deeply and then often fall asleep. So they put themselves in a nice chair or even in a bath, a bubble bath, and have some candles and some music and close their eyes and relax, and that is lovely. But it is not Zazen. I'm just clarifying things. When people come to my temple, I do meditation instruction with them, and then everybody faces the wall, and I face the wall too because I don't want to witness all this that's going on. And sometimes people just fall asleep, and then I say to them, that's up to you. If you want to come all this way and pay all this money and be here and have a nap, that's fine, just don't snore. But for myself, I think it's worth making the best use of the opportunity of sitting there to really pay attention. Daydreaming, having a fantasy, making a little movie in your head, making the sequel. It's all perfectly fine, can be enjoyable or not as you please, but it is a little bit of a waste of time if you're going there doing Zazen. Does that make sense? And that's just how it is. Over time, you'll get it. It's not something you can really express in words, because it happens in that place where words actually do not exist just yet. So any and all talking about it will just only sort of be talking around it, but it points to a direction, and so you can get the idea eventually of where that is. Just as falling asleep. You can't really express it in words, but we all know what it's like. And we all can do it. So basically that's the thing about that. Now I'll take a little 10-minute break, do a little stretching.